How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another edition of The Opinion. And the fight between Jared Big Baby Anderson and Charles Martin just ended. And coming into this fight, people wanted to know, was Jared Big Baby Anderson, was he going to be able to meet the challenges and answer some of the questions that we had? Because coming into this fight, his record was about 13-0 or 14-0. I believe it was 13-0. He had never been past the sixth round. This guy Charles Martin, who has been in there with some of the big names, was essentially going to be Jared Anderson's toughest test. And tonight it did show that obviously this was his toughest test. And Jared Big Baby Anderson answered some of the questions as well. But essentially, before I get into some of the questions that he answered, just some of my observations of Jared Big Baby Anderson as a young prospect in the heavyweight division, 23 years old, from Toledo, Ohio. The fight actually took place in Toledo, Ohio, as well. And just from the onset of the early parts of the fight, it is evident that this guy has skills. I mean, he's a heavyweight, about 6'3", 240, 242 pounds. But this guy has skills. He's got skills like what a middleweight and essentially like what a welterweight would have. Being able to set up his punches, being able to counter, being able to punch, and then essentially quickly get out of the way. His footwork is really good. Where he could really use some work, and this is where I'm going to kind of get into when I kind of break down the fight. He could use a little bit of work on his defense, but in terms of just pure talent, I don't know that there's another heavyweight in terms of pure talent that is better right now than Jared Big Baby Anderson. Although I know he hasn't fought people. Don't kill me over that comment. I know he hasn't really fought, the best of the best outside of fighting Charles Martin today, which was his toughest challenge. But I know he hasn't fought in guys better than that. But just in terms of pure talent, I think that Jared Big Baby Anderson is the most talented heavyweight. Now, am I saying he's the best heavyweight? No, I'm not saying that, because that remains to be seen as he continues his career and takes on bigger and bigger fights as time goes on. Obviously, other guys in the heavyweight division have much more experience than Big Baby Anderson, and that experience at this point probably most likely would carry them to a win over Big Baby Anderson, because in this fight early on, looked like Big Baby Anderson was going to cruise. I mean, the first 5 rounds, he won the first 4 or 5 rounds, including getting a knockdown, a solid knockdown after a counter punch, basically ducking underneath Charles Martin's punch and then essentially landing a right hook himself, which sent Charles Martin down to the ground. But then in about the 5th or the 6th round, that is when Martin started to come back. And this is where Anderson started to answer some of the questions. So people wanted to know, what would happen if he got stunned? What would happen if he got hit? He was able to show you tonight that, hey, he's got a little bit of a chin on him. Now, if he was to get hit by a punch with Wilder or some of the bigger heavyweights, would he have gone down? Maybe. But at this point in time, all we can go off of is just what we've seen so far. He was able to overcome a little bit of adversity when he got stunned or maybe a little bit hurt, and essentially still throw punches back at Charles Martin and basically take over the fight again within the last 9, or no, the fight was only a 10-round fight. So basically in the last 2 rounds, he was able to he was able to regain his composure after Charles Martin really, in my opinion, probably won the 5th and the 6th round. You could argue maybe the 7th as well. I know the scoring was wide, but at the end of the day, when Charles Martin stepped it up, Big Baby was right there every time to answer. Big Baby had never been past the 6th round. Martin took him all the way. Like I said, it was a 10-round fight. The card went the distance. So how would Big Baby react once you got to the 6th round and beyond into the deep waters? And I thought he reacted fine. He didn't seem gassed. Like I said, he was right there every time Martin tried to answer. Big Baby Anderson was right there with him, throwing punches, exchanging blows, maybe taking some shots, but also landing shots as well. So even though this was his toughest fight, I feel like he answered some of the questions, and I feel like he needed a fight like this. He needed a fight like this to get stunned. He needed a fight like this to go past the 6th round and to go into a decision. So that way, when he goes back to the drawing board, he now knows what he needs to work on. And the main thing he needs to work on is his defense. His offense is on point. But his offense, but even though his offense is on point, you can always sharpen your sword, and you can always get better, even at the things that you're already good at. But his defense is essentially what he needs to work on. And I think a fight like this was a good experience for him. It was a step up in competition, but it was also something to show him like, hey, these are the things that I need to work on if I want to continue to take on the big fights and retire by 27 or 28, like he said. Because if he's going to retire by 27 or 28 and he's 23 years old right now, he's only got 3 or 4 years to do that. And that must mean he is going to take on some big time fights. So before he takes on those big time fights, he wants to make sure that all of his skills, offense, defense, and his whole craft is fully well rounded before he gets in there with guys like a Wilder or an Usyk or even a Fury or even Anthony Joshua, as well as an Andy Ruiz Jr. As well. So now that Big Baby Anderson has had, he's essentially now had the fight in front of his hometown crowd against a middle of the road opponent as well in prime time. So now, generally, when fighters have these types of fights in front of their hometown crowd, against a middle of the road opponent in prime time, they generally start taking on contenders now. So now at this point, in my opinion, although he's only 14 fights in, he doesn't have time to waste, especially because he wants to retire at 27. So I think now it is now time for Big Baby to start taking on contenders, or in the next fight, at least take on someone who is of the same caliber as Charles Martin. But even with that being said, I am going to suggest that Big Baby start taking on some of the contenders in the heavyweight. I'm not talking about Wilder. I'm not talking about Usyk. I'm not talking about Fury. I'm not talking about Joshua. But possibly somebody like Andy Ruiz. Possibly somebody like Dylan White. I think he needs to start taking on those types of guys as well. Or, like I said, maybe a couple of more fights of the caliber of a guy like Charles Martin, like what he had tonight. So with that being said, who would you guys, tell me your guys' opinion. Who do you guys want to see Jared Big Baby Anderson fight next? What do you think about his skills, and essentially how far can he go? Who do you want to see him fight next, and who do you think he could possibly beat that is among some of these heavyweight contenders in the heavyweight division right now? So leave your comments below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because I'm going to have something to say about Canelo in my next video about him fighting Charlo. And if you're a college football fan, college football is right around the corner. I've got some things to talk about, college football predictions and things like that, conference winners, national championship winners. So subscribe down below, and you're not going to miss it. So other than that, I'm out.